Hi there. I'm Eric James from the James Preservation Trust. And it's March 1st, 2011, and around here, we're just kind of a little excited. You see, we've just been notified by archives.com, the genealogy research website, that we've been made the recipient of one of their research grants. In fact, they sent us a certificate making it all official. We're pretty proud of that. Anyway, in a few moments, I'm going to come back, and Archives has asked us a few questions they'd like us to answer about our research and how this grant will be dedicated. So, be right back in a moment to answer those questions for you. I never went in search of Jesse James. That always seemed a little perverse to me. Who in their right mind really wants to be related to Jesse James? No, I came to genealogy much like most people do. My mother and father died within 9 months of each other. The aunts and uncles had been dying off, and grandparents were long gone. And I was beginning to have that growing sense of aloneness. And no one in our family ever talked about the family or where we came from. And, except for us cousins, of course. Whenever we got together, cousins would always ask, "Did you hear anything? Aren't we supposed to be related to Jesse James?" I just laughed it off. I didn't know. But the great aunts, they always had an answer to the question. Whenever we asked the question of them, they'd say, "You know all you need to know about Jesse James. And that's that." And for a long time, that was that. The feeling of aloneness, my parents dying, I really wanted to learn, where did I come from? Who was I? But probably overriding all that was the question of, what was I about to become without them? That's a good question. Well, I probably learned what Jesse James should have learned. He didn't know his ancestry either. Every night, his mother, Zerelda, would sit he and Frank down before the fireplace, and she'd drum it into him night after night. "You come from royalty, and don't you ever forget it." Well, in the life Jesse chose to lead, after he went off to the Civil War and became a guerrilla after the war was over, falling into drug addiction and criminality, society did what society does. Society took him down. Now, I'll say this about the royals. Oh, and before I do, let me just tell you that in doing the genealogy, I've discovered our connection with the Royal House of Windsor and the Romanovs and so on. And let's just say none of us exchange Christmas cards, nor are they inviting me to any weddings. But what I learned about the royals is they know the full panorama of their history. They know where they came from, they know what they're supposed to be doing, and as long as they stay within those confines of their historical identity, society's not going to tamper with them. Society's not going to take them down. And that's what I've learned in learning my genealogy. I know who I am, I know where I've come from, I know what our family is supposed to be doing, and what we can do best. And as long as I stay with those parameters, I'm not going to become isolated like Jesse James. I'm not going to become alone. And unlike Jesse James, society's never going to take me down. That's probably the best lesson you can learn from studying family genealogy. Well, there have been so many stories. I mean, there's been 12 years of genealogy and historical research going on here. I've collected a lot of stories, talked to many of the family, had interviews with them, collected their stories, and they're amazing. They're surprising. I mean, you listen to these stories and you say, and Jesse James was part of this family? How can it be so? It's full of surprises. One of the surprising things for me personally is the fact that I've now been forced to live with family stigma. Now, most families have a secret or two that they keep hidden, they don't talk about. And that's a crime against the family. It's a crime against personal identity. It was the same way with the Jesse James family. If they had known better about themselves and who they were, they and the public both would have a much different opinion of the outlaw Jesse James. Let me just read for you a moment. A little blurb from the stories who I found out the James family to be. This comes from the book jacket of my upcoming book on the history of the Jesse James family. The James are preachers and teachers, patriots, partisans, and politicians. They are community builders, communists, and capitalists. They are educators, writers, and poets. Equally, they are pariahs, outcasts, and outlaws. Now, the most surprising thing I've learned about the Jesse James family is they have a unique ability to confound expectation. And just as an example, most people think of the family as being solely Anglo. The family is more than that. It's Native American, it's African American, it's Hispanic. And what we've learned from all these ethnicities is all these colors are virtually meaningless because it's the same genetics that prevail. And when you start looking at these genetics and their overriding history, generation after generation, you get a very, very different picture of the identity of the Jesse James family that comes through their stories. And this I'm trying to tell in the 4-volume history I've written about the family and that I continue to write about the family. The first volume to be published late this year in 2011. It's titled Jesse James Soul Liberty, Behind His Family's Heritage of Stigma and Silence. Now, I guarantee you, anybody who reads these stories about the family of Frank and Jesse James will come away thinking very, very differently about Frank and Jesse James as outlaws. Well, genealogy research certainly produces a lot of surprises. That's part of the joy of doing genealogy. Right now we're facing $4 a gallon gas, if not $5 a gallon gas. So it's not so easy just to pop in the car and drive 1,000 miles to rummage around in a courthouse basement or the attic archives of some library to find what hasn't been found before. So we're going to use part of this grant to do that. But more specific, there's a more specific use that we're going to put it to. Back in 2002, at the James Gang and Family Reunion we held in Paso Robles, California, Judge James R. Ross, he was the great-grandson of Jesse James, now deceased. He and I formed the James Preservation Trust to deal with the family's history. And at that time we also received a grant to conduct a DNA study of the family. And that work has been going on now for several years, and we now consider it pretty complete. But that produced probably the most stunning surprise that all of the research has produced. As you know, we publish genealogy websites, Stray Leaves. People on the internet can find it at ericjames.org. But in there we have a genealogical database of everything that we found in the research. So in that database, having published it, one family went to that database on the internet, and then they came forward and they said, we think we're part of your family. Well, normally when that happens, we give every due consideration possible, and the first thing we ask for is the family history. Well, they provided a family history. It looked like it might link up, but we weren't sure. So then we asked if they would mind providing a DNA sample, and they complied. And surprise of surprises, their DNA results came back match for match for match for match. A dead-on match. No anomalies. So we knew they were related, we just didn't know how. Now, the family has always known there were bankers in the family. Public doesn't generally know that, but the family knew it. However, what the family never knew, and what the public never knew, and what we learned from this DNA study is there are slave traders in the Jesse James family. And that story is going to be told in Volume 2 of my 4-volume history, coming out in 2012. But to get to your specific question, we are going to be dedicating this grant to furthering the research of the slave traders, and most specifically, we are going down into the Deep South and we are going to be interviewing descendants of enslaved families who were sold by the James family. We always thought that in all the genealogical research, given the fact that enslavement was common in colonial Virginia, that eventually we'd discover descendants of those family slaves. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. We still hold out hope for that. We have also been able to find the family's relationship through the Woodson relatives of the James family with the descendants of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. That's been established. But this thing about slave traders is a whole new surprise. So that's where we're going to dedicate this grant toward fulfilling that story, going down, doing the research, recording the interviews, and then next year we'll tell the story in the 2nd volume of Jesse James Soul Liberty. And let me just take a moment here to express our appreciation to archives.com for this grant. We'd certainly be able to do the work if we didn't have the grant, but having the grant will allow us to do it a lot more quickly and a lot more efficiently. So thank you, archives.com. We're very grateful.